Hello and welcome back. Today in this video, I'm going to be talking all about the design process for the light element, which is going to be in the upcoming expansion for the Algomancy card game that's showing up around spring 2026 on Kickstarter. So if you're interested, go check that out, link in the description. There's two elements showing up in the expansion. The first one is the dark element, which I talked about the design in my last video. So if you haven't seen that, go watch that one first probably, because I designed the dark element before the light element. So there's a lot of things I learned from that process that made this one much easier. But that being said, today we're going to talk all about light. And again, just general disclaimer, we still have about 6 months left of development. The base card designs themselves, like the effects, are pretty solidified, but the art isn't finalized. The card names, the unit types, like horror is a placeholder for a lot of them, but eventually I'll go through and fill in the unit types, give them better names, things like that. So today we're talking most about the card effects, what the cards do. The last stage of design for me is finishing the art. So this art, some of it might stay. Like I really like Triskaidekaphage, the way it looks. Um, but a lot of it is also just giving you more art direction than like final art, if that makes sense. But anyway, let's get into talking about the design. So really the dark element is what inspired making the light element, because if you watched the last video, dark was basically leftover mechanics from the old water element that were so cool. I knew I had to make a separate element that had all of the like discard, graveyard matters, bin matters type payoffs. If you're making a dark element, you know, opposites, you got to make light element as well. And putting it in an expansion like light versus dark felt pretty straightforward, or like just a good idea. So really the inspiration for the light element was just how cool the dark element was. Um, and then the mechanics really just came. I think the light element was the first element where the mechanics came from the theme. Usually I'm a mechanics first type of design, but in this case I picked the theme and then from the theme kind of got some of the mechanics. So the design of the light element started around 2024. And these are some of the cards that we tried out with a bunch of different mechanics. We're going to go through all of them. Some of them came out, some of them don't. You can see this is quite a text box, at least by Algomancy standards. We typically try to keep cards to 3 or fewer lines of text if at all possible. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a lot of text for an Algomancy card. But yeah, we tried like making flying units, interacting with cards that are cached. If you're new to Algomancy or just don't know what cache is, when you glimpse a card in the base game, you put it into the zone called cache, and then you can play it from that zone. Really, there's no interaction with cache in the base 5 elements, but cache is like a place where you can put cards outside of the game that isn't like permanently removed. Because when you erase a card in Algomancy, it's gone forever. Like you never interact with erased cards. Cache is like a temporary storage zone. So Oracle of Swarming Visions, whenever you play a card from cache, create a 1/1 unit with flying. Basically, if you glimpse into something and play it from glimpse, that will trigger it. There's other payoffs for cache that we'll get to later, but that was like the original inspiration there. I always knew I wanted to sequester life gain into one element. It makes sense to put it into the light element. So light has life gain, potential life gain payoffs, and then it has some prophecy stuff and some debt stuff too. All really cool mechanics, but we're going to go through these one by one because there's a lot to unpack here. We don't have any infinite mana costs anymore. That turned out to be a really bad idea. So the first thing, like the first major thing we tried was Seraphs, which is a 1/1 flying token. So really inspired by Oracle of Swarming Visions to make flying, we just replaced it with Seraphs. And then when it despawns, you gain a debt, which we'll talk about debt later, but it's just like you lose mana, essentially. So it's like this cheap thing that's cool, 1/1 flyer, not too impactful, and then when it dies, you get a debt. So risk reward, I'm always a big fan of that kind of thing, because you could give your opponent Seraphs and kill them to give them debt. You could give yourself Seraphs, and then if they die, you pay the price of having these units. And yeah, Oracle Swarming Visions eventually got replaced. Instead of making 1/1s flying, made Seraphs. We tried this for quite a while. It was fun. This card was really fun to enable and pay off, but here's some more Seraph stuff we tried. Oh yeah, this was what the Oracle ended up being. Whenever you play a card from cash, make a Seraph. Shard Sprite, whenever I spawn or die, make a Seraph. And then this one was crazy. When I spawn, make 3 Seraphs. And as long as your life total is prime, your units gain -2, -2. Something you'll know about my design process is I just make crazy effects in the beginning because it's the easiest way to get a sense of how the game should feel. So these are like some of the toned down designs. The first couple of days of playtesting are a lot of fun because there's crazy stuff going on. And then you eventually hone in on what effects feel good and stuff like that. So we tried this. The problem with Seraphs is just that they were really hard to balance, as a first and foremost, because flying in Algomancy is so powerful. If you come from other card games like Magic, when something is flying, only it gains flying. Really easy to balance because if it's a 1/1, it's not hitting you that much. But in this game, you can stack units in formation. So if you just have 3 Seraphs, you know, you can hit for 3 flying, it's not a big deal. But if suddenly you have a Towering Colossus, that 1/1 Seraph that you made that was, you know, quote unquote inconsequential, suddenly is hitting for 11 flying damage with the Colossus behind it. Or it's enabling like a Slink to sneak through, get some combat damage. So these were really hard to balance. And so we ended up cutting them. But the other reason why we cut Seraphs, because actually, like, when I was making this video, I got more interested in Seraphs than I have been in a while. So I'm not saying they're never going to show up, but the other reason why I wanted to cut them is a lot of the other elements in Algomancy have token-based payoffs. Like, you get fireballs from red or wisps, you get plant tokens from wood, you get crystals from earth, metal gets robots, water doesn't get that many tokens. So it's kind of nice to have just another element where tokens aren't in the identity. And it's also a very interesting design challenge. And I think it would make it feel more unique rather than like spamming all these 1/1 flying creatures or whatever. Just focus on other things. So that was the first thing we tried. And from that, I was like, we're not doing tokens in the light. Almost. There's a couple, but it's not like a theme. There's like 2 cards that do it. The next main theme is life. And this one was kind of something I always wanted. Like, I like the idea of life gain in a game, but it's also not something that you want to always have present. And the way that Algomancy works, because you get to select which elements you're playing with, it's pretty cool to have all life gain stuff contained in one element, because then you can like decide, hey, today let's play with some life gain cards and put it into your 3 elements that you're drafting with, or keep it aside if you don't want to play with life gain. And it also lets you know, if white isn't in the element, there's no way for them to gain life. So it's kind of the best of both worlds because life gain is really interesting. It can let you change the tides of battle pretty easily. It can let you get some really interesting fights where you're constantly barely scraping by at low life totals. I love that, but it can get tedious when there's too much life gain. So yeah, anyway, I just love having it all in one element. So the first thing we started with life gain is having this blessed attribute, which is, for those who played like Magic or other games, it's like life steal. Damage dealt by a blessed source causes a controller to gain that much life. So God Ray, 2 mana, 3 damage, you gain 3 life. Pretty awesome. And so we started with, kind of the obvious thing design. Okay, well, we have life gain, get stuff that triggers when you gain life. So like Life Bounceer, whenever you gain life, glimpse 1. And that cast a card, so you could play it off the profit to get some Seraphs. There were some things turning in the old game designs. And then there's obviously, again, this is like a good example of placeholder art in name. This art doesn't match the rest of the game. But anyway, it's an attribute that gives blessed onto a unit. So now you can give your thing the ability to gain life, attack with these in a column, self-enables, was really cool. The problem is, the same as discard if you watched the dark element, triggers that care about gaining life are the most parasitic possible mechanic. I call these made-up mechanics where, if you replace this with any other word, or basically it doesn't interact with anything mechanically, it's just looking for one specific trigger. And because life gain is sequestered into light, there's no possible way that this card could interact with any other cards in any other element. And that's just not the Algomancy style. We don't want things that don't interact with our elements. We want to be able to find the weirdest synergies between two cards and make it happen. So I think life gain as a payoff is cool because mechanically gaining life is interesting, but life gain as like an enabler or as a trigger is really, really poor because it's pretty rare. And as I say here, it's like a reward for a reward, right? Like gaining life is already something that's a little bit of a bonus. Like God Ray, 2 mana 3 damage is kind of nice. The life gain's just a little bit extra. So even if it wasn't so parasitic, it's weird to make a mechanic that's based on a reward, because then it's inherently not good at like helping you come back from behind. It's very win more, pillow fort type gameplay. And I think I have a background in Magic the Gathering. Life gain tends to be like that. It's just, you gain a bunch of life, then what, right? So we didn't want to do that. And the easy switch that we tested first is instead of when you gain life, looking at specific values of your life total. Because then you can hit it from going up, you can hit it from going down, and if you can hit it from going down, there's a lot of different ways to get there. So instead of having it say when you gain life, when your life total becomes odd, glimpse 1, it's pretty interesting now because now there's so many different ways to change your life total. In fact, it's quite mathematically interesting. Anytime you take an odd amount of damage, your life total is going to switch from even to odd. So if you have even life total, you just have to take an odd amount of damage or gain an odd amount of life to change the parity of your life. So if we make every life gain payoff and every paying life payoff in light be odd, then basically this just says whenever you gain or lose life, glimpse 1. But there's a lot more interesting mechanics besides that, right? You can, in the base set, you can fireball yourself, you can flame of history yourself, you can seismomancy yourself, you can take damage from a bloated mana bub, you can block or not block to change the parity of your life total, right? If they attack with even, it won't change the parity, but any unit with like 1 power or 3 or 5, you can take a hit to trigger your Lifebound Seer. And now you go from something that doesn't interact with any card in the base game to probably the most interactable mechanic in the whole game, because everything, the whole game is about winning, taking damage, stuff like that. So everything can interact with your life total in some way, which is really cool. So we started out testing quite a few different even odd mechanics. Insatiable Want is kind of a pet card of mine. It's each player with an even life total sacrifices a unit and loses 3 life. Each player with an odd life total draws a card and gains 3 life. Pretty high stakes because the life totals being so interactable means you have to manipulate your opponents and your own to make it work out. So it's a really high cost, but if you make it work, it's like drain 6 and they sacrifice a unit and you draw a card. End up being too strong, we toned it down a lot. Calming Force, every element gets like some mass counterspell. This one we tested was negate all effects controlled by players with even life totals. So you'd have to make yours be odd, counter all their stuff. This one ended up being terrible, actually, because it was really easy for the opponent to like have a way to manipulate their life total, and then this just doesn't do anything. So this one we ended up replacing later. And then Ploosh, again, placeholder name, stuff like that. But this one is interesting too, because after combat, if your life total is odd, you gain 3 life and draw a card. But if it's even, you sacrifice the unit and lose 3 life. So you can play this as a removal spell if you can make the opponent's life total even, or you can play it as card draw if you can make your life total odd. The thing I like the most about this type of design is if you can't sit at the same life total because you're gaining 3 life. If your life total is odd, it's going to become even. So to trigger it next turn, you would have to do something else to earn that card draw a little bit. Now, earn that card draw is definitely a bit overstated, but we'll talk about, there's quite a few ways to like change your life total from even to odd in the mechanic. We got a little crazy and started looking at prime cards as well, because I think it is very thematic for the light element. We're looking at numbers. And the thing that's really interesting too is primes are clustered around lower life totals. So 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. It basically means you're very likely to hit a prime number at low life total. So it operates as a comeback mechanic, similar to even odd. Many downsides to this. The biggest is we have to list out all of the primes in every single card. And then instead of being like this interesting thing you can kind of intuit, it's more just like you have to look up the number on a list and then look at their life total, do math over and over and over again. Whereas with even odd, you're just like, is it even? And then it can switch to odd. You can think in this like binary sense. But this just becomes list lookup. So we tried a couple of these. This one was real wild. Again, when you see an Algomancy card that has, this is 5 lines of text, even though a lot of it's reminder text, that's generally a sign it's a poor design. But this was cool. Target unit gains multi-strike, and then if your life total is prime, it gains blessed. So a really cool like comeback mechanic because it hits twice. If you set it to prime, you gain a bunch of life. Didn't end up making it. And then Apex of Primality is a card that terrorized players for as long as it was in print. Your opponents can't play cards that aren't prime. Their units that aren't prime lose all abilities and become weak and feeble. Weak means they do half damage, and feeble means they can't block. I will say, this card was a nightmare, but the rules text weak and feeble goes really hard, and I will definitely be putting that on some card at some point. Just not this guy. Prime numbers, we ended up scrapping because they're just too messy, and the benefit isn't that great. That doesn't mean I would never make a prime life total card, but I think it would be far in the future when I have more design experience to make it worth it. Because everything I wanted from prime life totals, you can basically get from even and odd. And then you don't have to have a list of numbers and all that stuff. So this is kind of where we're at right now. There aren't many even odd cards. And I'm not entirely sure, like the further we get along in the design process, the less these become necessary. I do quite like having a couple of them though, because it is really nice to play this like game of should my life total be even or odd. And the way we've designed it is that odd life totals are always desirable. So you can play around these without, if you don't know what your opponent has, because you just always know if my life total is odd, I'm safe. And if it's even, it's not good. So that gives you a little bit as a player, some way to like plan ahead if you're playing in the light element. And then these are some of the life total manipulators, but they're also just awesome cards. Really cool. Blob of the Dark Order, again, probably placeholder art, but it is kind of cool. This card is so much better than it looks. Pay 1 life, I gain piercing until regroup. So you can use this to set your life total to basically whatever you want. You can trigger life gain or life loss at any time. You can change the parity of your life total pretty easily. And a 3 mana 3/4 piercing is just good. Like this card is one of the best cards in the light element. And I'm always surprised at how good the card is. But like this kind of card is just so sick because it looks innocuous, but then you play it, the piercing's kind of nice, and then you're like, oh, I can pay a bunch of life, and then I can always set my life total to odd for this or for Ploosh. Suddenly you're like able to start taking advantage of these other cards in your element. And it's really like satisfying to see players discover that. And the same thing with Life Leech and Handpeeper. Like this card is really cool because it's a virus that lets you go down a lot of life to grow your unit. So it could be a really expensive way to save something from damage, kill spell. If you have a ton of life, you can push the last bits of combat damage over. It is expensive, but again, you can change the parity of your life total at will. And then Handpeeper, pay 3 life, look at target player's hand. The light element is very focused on information and things being face up so that you can know what's going on. So this effect is actually really good in Algomancy. But it's genuinely the reason this card is so good is because you can just pay 3 life at any time. It's like the main reason it's played. And then being able to look at your opponent's hand is just extra. And I think that's really nice when you're excited to be able to just drop your life total by 3 at any time. But the odd even parity makes this so much more rewarding than something like a life gain payoff would. And it's much more predictable than something like prime numbers are, because some prime numbers you have to go down by even numbers, some are odd. So these worked out really well. And then perhaps my favorite card in the whole element, 1 mana, any number of target players each lose 1 life, draw a card. So it's passable burn spell. Pay 1, they lose a life, draw. That's fine. But the main thing that this comes in for is like you can just sneakily manipulate your opponent's life total or yours. For example, if they play Insatiable Want, you can hard counter it with your penance by, if you're even, they're odd, you just make both players lose 1 life, and then they're even, you're odd, and it switches. So it's cool that it works for that. It's a spell that draws a card, so it triggers a lot of things that care about playing spells. It triggers life loss. There are some things that just care if you have lost life. So not just switching even odd, but just did your life total change at all? It can trigger that. So I love this card so much because it looks like it does nothing, but in the way the element is designed, it does a lot. Really happy about it. And then the main trigger that we have moved towards instead of like when you gain life is when you gain or lose life. This card is crazy. When you gain or lose life, create that many 1/1 units. It is bounded to once per turn, so you can't just play Blob of the Dark Order and pay 1 life 20 times to make 21 ones. This card really rewards you with big life total swings. But if you get there, you can get some like really giant board states, which is why it costs 7 mana. But really fun payoff. If you can engineer a situation where you lose like 15 life in 1 turn, boom, you have an army now. And I think that kind of thing is really fun, forcing players to I don't know, it's really fun when you're in a situation where you're excited to take a lot of damage. Or you can also gain a lot of life. This can be triggered that way too, but more commonly it is losing large amounts of life total. And then we also have some other mechanics. Again, this is placeholder art and stuff. We have some other mechanics where you just kind of care about specific life totals. So this guy, during the haste step, you predict what your life total is going to be. And then at the start of deployment, you get a 5/5 if you match the prediction. This card makes this really fun mini game where you look at your opponent and you're like, are they going to attack me? How much are they going to hit me for? Do I have the ability to manipulate my life total? If they don't hit me for as much as I want, because you name this, and then you go to battle, and they could like not attack. If you're like, oh, they're going to hit me for 10, you name 10 less life, they don't attack you. Or you name no change, and then they do attack you, and you're like fighting to try and not have your life total change. This card's a lot of fun. And then we get into the debt mechanic. So I kind of mentioned this before. The main motivation for debt initially was I wanted a way for players to do something kind of like resource denial to their opponents, because right now the way the game plays, you kind of curve out perfectly most games. You go like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 mana if you want to, which is really nice, but sometimes it's also nice to play offbeat. So instead of going 2, 4, 6, like 2, 3, 5, 8, 11, just so you can't play as predictably. That was the initial motivation for debt. And the way it works, at the end of the resource step, you pay 1 per debt as much as possible, then remove that much debt. So if you have 5 debt, you pay 5, debt goes away. If you have 10 debt and only 6 mana, you pay 6 and you keep 4 debt that you have to pay the next turn. So there's no like escaping the debt. So we started out, like I said, the initial motivation was putting debt on your opponent as like a tempo play. So like debt blep, when my combat deals combat damage to an opponent, they gain 1 debt. And it has like some kind of evasion and haste. So the idea is you play it turn 1, you attack them, and then they have only 3 mana on turn 2 instead of 4. Or tax taker, when I attack or block, each opponent gains a debt. So they constantly have 1 fewer mana that turn than they thought they would. Same with debt muncher. When it despawns, each opponent gains 2 debt. So it plays well in like a sacrifice theme or stuff like that. It was cool. I tried this for like a full year. I literally just made the change away from all these cards a couple weeks ago. And the reason really came down to, if debt works, it's not fun. Because if you give them enough debt where they can't play the game, then they're not playing the game. It's not very fun. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't feel like it did anything. And I think the biggest thing is sometimes it does work and it still feels like it doesn't do anything because you, as the player giving your opponent the debt, can't see the agonizing decisions the opponent has to make, right? Like if you play debt blep, you give them one debt. They have one less debt on turn 2. You don't get to see that they wanted to play something that costed 4 and instead have to play something that costs 2 and waste a mana. You don't really get to see that. You just see them play a card, the game moves on. So even if it is working in the like perfect case where they're still playing but not as well as they wanted, it's not satisfying to the player because there's no feedback on the actions you're taking being like impactful in any way. And in the situations where it is, it's just miserable because nobody's playing the game. But despite my intentions, this card, Reap the Dew, kind of saved debt as a mechanic in the game. Because this card is awesome. This card says erase target unit unless its controller gains debt equal to twice your light affinity. And this is fun because it gives the opponent a choice. And debt as a choice is so interesting because now, if they can't play the game, you can say, you did this to yourself. Or if you put debt on yourself and you can't play the game, you're like, man, why did I make this bad decision? And that reframing completely saved this mechanic, I think. Because this card's really fun. On turn 4, it's like, do you want to gain 8 debt or keep your unit? And you're like, sometimes you take the debt and then you skip your whole next turn and you regret it. Or sometimes you don't take the debt and then you don't use your mana next turn. So it's a really interesting play. And so there's a lot of cards we reworked. So Glutton of Absolution used to say, when my column deals combat damage, each player gains 3 debt. So this was like a way to spread debt to both players, like lock them down from paying mana, lock yourself down from paying mana. But it just, giving your opponent debt just didn't feel good. So we just went all in. It's a giant unit now. It used to have Sluggish, which is a drawback. It does combat damage last. But it was huge. Now it's even bigger with no Sluggish, but it only gives you debt. So now you just get this way overstated unit that bogs you down in your game. And so now you get to, the next turn when you can't play all the spells you want, you get to be like, oh yeah, I did this to myself. So it's a lot of fun. Same with Debt Blep. We talked about the old design. Now it's like an interesting virus. Again, the art needs to change. It's not a caterpillar type. We'll fix all of that when we get to like theming the cards. But it is a virus that lets you gain 2 debt to give it +3/+3 until regroup. So now it's like a cool combat trick. Instead of paying mana now, you pay mana later. Really fun card. This one isn't completely finalized, but I've been really enjoying the effect. Because instead of paying mana now, you can tap out and do things. There's also debt payoffs that care about this. Greed Angel is one of my favorites. Again, placeholder name. But it's a 2-mana 3/3. When I spawn, you gain 3 debt and draw a card. So typically you would play this on turn 1. And then you skip basically your entire turn 2 by playing this. But you get this big unit, you get to draw a card. So you're basically trading your entire turn 2 for a card, which is an interesting gamble. I think it pays off sometimes, it doesn't pay off other times. But it's just really nice. Now, mostly you're debting yourself, or if you are giving debt to your opponent, you give them a choice between 2 painful things. And I know normally Punisher cards like this in card games, one choice is almost always better than the other, but when you're deciding between keeping your best unit and your entire next turn, it's hard. So the more choices we can give to the opponent like that, I think the better debt becomes as that. But for now, it's mostly I can do something and pay the price later. In debt, I don't want to spoil too much of the hybrid cards because I think those are the most interesting. But debt has a really fun role in quite a few hybrid cards. So just a couple to talk about. Like Spells Hyper Beam. It costs 4 mana, but then you gain 4 debt as a cost to pay it. So you're kind of paying 8. But 4 now, 4 later. And then it's, kills a unit, draws a card. But it's effectively paying 8 mana to do so, which is very expensive. And if they counter it, you still lose the 4 mana next turn. Deferral Drone is probably my favorite debt use in the game, which is once per turn you can gain 4 debt to make the next card you pay cost 3 less. So it's like you're taking out a loan on your mana. Because I've always said I don't want mana cheating in Algomancy, but I'm okay with a loan. Because if you get very far ahead this turn, you're going to be way behind next turn. And there aren't many cards designed in Algomancy that are like so impactful if you can play them like one turn earlier. But people have been doing some really interesting stuff with this card. So I'm excited to see how it plays out as we keep testing, because it's just the idea of taking a loan out on your mana is so cool. And then same with Covenant of the Damned. This is like the only quote unquote unfair reanimation spell we have. Put a unit from your bin into play, but you gain debt equal to its cost. So you can reanimate whatever you want. You can cheat in like a 10 cost unit, but then you're going to have to skip your whole next turn to do that. The opponent gets to interact. So I don't know. It's been very interesting so far seeing how this plays out. So that's the debt mechanic. Then we go to Prophecy. This one actually just worked out. This is like one of the best serendipitous mechanic designs. Most of the others required tuning, and this one was kind of worked right away. I think part of it was because the base inspiration came from just a really good mechanic from Magic the Gathering, which was Suspend. So the Foretold is like the best example of this is like pure Suspend design, which is the way Prophecy works. You can, as an alternate cost, you can play the card normally, or you can pay the Prophecy cost, and then once the Prophecy is fulfilled, you have the ability to play this card for free whenever you could normally play it. So in this case, Prophecy 1 turn passes. On turn 1, you can play this for 0 as a Prophecy. And then at the end of the turn has passed. So then during the next turn, you can play it because you've satisfied the Prophecy. Which the only time you can play it, it's a unit, would be the following deployment. So it gives you this like really cool like looking ahead mechanic that I think really complements like giving yourself debt, right? Because you can get short-term gain for long-term pain, and then combine that with short-term loss for long-term reward. And it's this really interesting tension of planning ahead versus getting stronger now, setting it up so you're strong at the right time to interact with your opponent is really what we want Light to do. Like Light manipulates timescales, and that's really fun. But Prophecy has a lot of cool tricks up its sleeve, because instead of just having 1 turn passes, we can have any condition we want to satisfy for the Prophecy. So for Divine Intervention, the Prophecy, your life is 5 or less. So you can prophesy this early, and then anytime your life becomes 5 or less, you've fulfilled the Prophecy, and then you can play this for free anytime you could. This is a battle card, so you can have this face up, and then your opponent is kind of like, I don't want to get you below 5 or less life because you could play this for free. But as you saw before, there's a lot of ways you can naturally get your life total low. So like mid-combat, you could like play something that lets you pay a bunch of life, get your life low, fulfill the Prophecy, and then start using this in combat to interact with your opponent at a time they didn't expect. That's really cool. You could do things like counting down, so Prophecy 13 units die. That's it. Yours, your opponent's, doesn't matter. You just put it in play. Eventually stuff dies over time. If you can get enough things to die, you can play this for free. Or you can spend 13 mana to play this guy out. And this effect, cards your opponents play during battle gain, sacrifice a unit. Really strong effect. So I think that's, oh, there's one more. Like there's so many cool things we can do with Prophecy. Most of them end up being the most fun in hybrids. But we've only scratched the surface of what you can do and what has been done in the game with these. But like your units have 4 unique costs. Now you want like a token, a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop, something like that. So this card's cool because it's like a little quest. And when you satisfy the quest, you get this cool effect. Your whole team's flying and big. This specific card, we still need more testing. It might be broken, but I really like this Prophecy mechanic of like just making you do something that you wouldn't normally care about to get some reward. This reward might be too good, so we might change it to something else. We'll see. And the Prophecy cards use the cache mechanic, where you like put them in a separate region, that's the cache, and then you can play them from that region as if they were in your hand. So something like Prof, when you play a card from anywhere other than your hand, cares about that, and it will let you draw a card. So that is like the baseline synergy with Prof. But Prof also like spell tokens, because those are cards you play from not your hand. Cool synergies there. And then you have other things that let you cash units. So Wax and Witness lets you cash yours or your opponent's units. And Prophecy 1 battle passes means basically until the end of battle. So if you have a prof, you Wax and Witness your prof, it goes into cash. Battle ends, Prophecy fulfilled, you can play it during deployment. Great. So it kind of, for those who come from other games, this kind of like flickers it or just delays it until end of deployment or end of the battle, which is really cool because you get like re-triggers on cast effects. You can save it for later. If you have 2 of these, you can loop them and keep playing them for free to protect them while you block. So there's a lot of like really cool things we can do with Prophecy. Probably the mechanic that I'm most excited for, but I have to like keep myself constrained at least for the base release of Light because there's already a lot going on, and if I went too crazy, it would be overwhelming. So we kept it kind of stable here, but there's so much room to grow with this mechanic in particular. And then, yeah, the cash stuff, Glimpse also lets you play cards from out of your hand. So Light has some amount of Glimpse mechanics. I know you saw this guy quite a bit earlier. We finally just moved it to when I attack or block, Glimpse 2. Really straightforward mechanic. And it ended up being an enabler instead of a payoff, and I think that's great for something that Glimpse is. Because you attack with this, it kind of draws you a card, but then this Glimpse lets you cash things, which cards like Stalwart Sentinel, whenever you play cards from somewhere other than your hand, it gets bigger, or like Prof, you're drawing cards. So I like this version of the card a lot more, and cash has just been a lot of fun overall. Something that I'm really also excited about for the Light element is its style of interaction, because I wanted it to feel substantially different than the rest of the elements, just because Light feels very like standoffish and like all the information is out in the open, and a lot of interaction in most of the rest of the game is wondering what they have in their hand. Light just puts it out there and says, deal with this. So Void Mandible is probably the best example of a Light counterspell, which is it has haste, so you can play it pre-battle. And when a non-token card is played during battle, you have to sacrifice this to negate that effect. It's not optional. So if you play it and you want to play something, you have to counter your own effect. But likely, you get to choose, what regions you attack with this into. You get to choose if you play it or not. So you're probably going to be playing this before combats where you expect the opponent to have to act first. So if you put this out there ahead of combat, now their life just became so hard because they have to deal with, another counter spell. They know it's there, but that sometimes that doesn't make it any easier for them. And I like the torturous decisions that Light puts on your opponent is so fun. I really like that. This is another one, Calming Force. Can't be played from your hand. Negate all other effects. So you can prophesy it. Your opponent knows it's coming. It's going to be free during those turns. So it's out in the open, but it's a free counterspell when you need it. Or you can glimpse into it. It costs 2, right? So if you can play it from cash, then you can play it and negate all their effects kind of as a surprise, but you'd have to like attack with a Lifebone Seer, hit it off of glimpse, and then use it as a counterspell. So for the most part, this is just a face-up counterspell. Feels really different than the rest. Quite excited about it. It has a lot of like decrees. I don't really know how to like say it, but it feels like you make a declaration and then that impacts the game. So the everywhere placeholder name for sure. During haste, you name a card, and then the card you named last of this loses all abilities. You got to remember this is Algomancy rules, so this is only if it's in their region, only during battle, essentially. But this is like such a cool way for you to like look at their board and be able to stop something that they're going to do to you in a way that feels like you're crossing the region boundary, but you're not, because you're just naming the card in your region. And this only impacts the card when you're in region with it. But in playtesting, this is an effect that I just made just to see what happened. It plays so well. It's one of my favorite cards from the set. And you can stop your own drawbacks. You can stop the opponent's good stuff. You can name something before they attack you with an attack trigger. They don't get the attack trigger. It's just an awesome card. really, really good comeback card too. Like if they have this giant graft stack, you just name the unit with a graft stack, and now it doesn't trigger. It kind of feels like it equalizes the thing where if you have initiative and you attack, there's no way for you as the player to like stop that attack trigger from going off. You can counter it and stuff. But this is kind of a way to combat that, where now, if the opponent has initiative, they can set up this giant graph trigger. You play the Everywhere, name their card, and now they're sad. It's just so cool. And then Arbiter of Remistus, again, cards played during battle gain pay 2 life. They know it's coming, but you can play it during a turn of key interaction. Really helpful as an aggro deck. You just play this, and then if you have the customary Algomancy stack of 3 to 4 card interaction, they lost 6 life trying to stop things. So this card has been incredible. It might be too strong. I might have to drop the stats or make it more expensive, but the effect is amazing. And this one was intentionally made to be an even amount of life gain or loss, because it makes it easier when you're not constantly shifting parity from every single spell played. So every life change that you get to opt into is odd, and every life change that's mandatory is even. So that way you can only like intentionally manipulate your odd or even life total parity. And then we just get to some of the fun other cards in the light element. 13 ends up being a pretty important life total for the light, and I added 1 just for fun. But when your life total becomes 1 or 13 during battle, you get a triple graft trigger. So for those Amphiphora fans out there, this card lets you get a triple graft if you can manipulate your life total during battle, which is really fun. Really easy way to set your life total to 13 is Triska Decaphage. When I attack or block, your life total becomes 13. So funny way to set up Witness of the Crossing, but the main use of this is if your life is like 2, you can play this attack up to 13, and then you can start every turn, you can gain like a bunch of life. You can pay it down and get it back. This card has saved me so many times in battles. Your opponent gets you down to 2 and you're like, great, I've got him. You play this, and now you can at least get to 13 every turn, which is sometimes enough. And then Huba God, the one we've all been waiting for. When I attack or block, create a token that's a copy of me in my formation. And the tokens also make copies. So you play Huba God, he's a 2/2. You attack, you get 2 of them. Next turn, you attack with 2 Huba Gods, you get 4. Next turn, you attack with 4 Huba Gods, you get 8. My favorite Huba, it's so fun. I don't know entirely what it has to do with light, but somehow it fits in my mind. It's beautiful. Anyway, there's so much more in the light element that I wasn't able to show. There's a lot of really cool hybrid cards that are also missing from this expansion or this presentation. So definitely check out the Kickstarter coming spring 2026. Link in the description if you want to find it. And we're still playtesting these cards all the time. We have 6 months left at least before the Kickstarter launches, and we want to get as much testing as possible. We're going to be running tournaments, so if you want to participate in that, join the Discord, link in the description, help us playtest. You can see the cards. It's a lot of fun. Otherwise, hopefully you'll help support the game on the Kickstarter, and I'll see you there.